We are going to construct a unit circle. First step, on the XY plane, draw a circle with a radius of 1. We will be using angles, which give us very nice answers, so we can concentrate on building a mental image of the basics of the unit circle. On the circle, we first draw a line connecting the origin to the circle at a 30-degree angle, which is equal to pi over 6 radians. Our next line we draw is at 45 degrees, or pi over 4 radians. Then we chose 60 degrees, which is pi over 3. Then we label the y-axis at 90 degrees, or pi over 2 radians. The second quadrant, which is to the left of the y-axis and above the x-axis, is labeled as a mirror reflection of the first quadrant that we drew. The third is labeled in a similar way. The fourth and final quadrant that we label is labeled in the same way, and notice that it can be considered a reflection of the third quadrant across the y-axis. It can also be considered a reflection across the x-axis of the first quadrant. Then we label the 4 points where the circle meets the axes, just as we would label any point on a normal XY plane, with the x value first, followed by a comma, and then the y value. Now we need to label each point where each straight line meets the circle. For the line at 30 degrees, it meets the circle on the XY plane, where the x value is square root of 3 over 2, and the y value is 1/2, as labeled. Label the point where the 45-degree line meets the circle in the same manner. Continue with the line at 60 degrees. Then through the second quadrant in the same way. Notice that the x value here becomes negative for angles greater than 90, since we are now to the left of the y-axis, where x values are always negative. The same reasoning is applied to labeling the third quadrant, but here we are to the left of the y-axis and below the x-axis. This means that both of the numbers are going to be negative. In the fourth quadrant, we are again to the right of the y-axis, so the x value is positive, but we are still below the x-axis, so the y values are negative. Now let's work with the first section that was drawn. If we simply draw a line from the x-axis straight up to the point where the line and the circle meet, we now have a right triangle with one of its angles 30 degrees. A right triangle can be constructed in the same way from any point that we labeled, but for now we will focus on the one obtained by the 30-degree angle we first drew. Remember how we labeled each point with an ordered pair that told exactly where the point was on the XY plane? Well, that ordered pair gives a lot of information. It gives us the length of the sides of the triangle as well. In this example, square root of 3 over 2 is the length of the bottom line of the triangle, and 1/2 is the length of the vertical line. We know that the hypotenuse, which is the longest leg, has a length of 1 because our original circle that we drew had a radius of length 1. This x and y value are also the sine and cosine values of 30 degrees. Remember that sine equals the length of the opposite leg, which is in pink, over the hypotenuse. Since the hypotenuse is 1, dividing by it doesn't change our answer. So we can simply look at the y value for the sine of 30 degrees. The same thing can be said with the x value. It is the cosine of 30 degrees, which is given by the adjacent leg divided by the hypotenuse. These steps can be applied to any of the angles on the unit circle.